A 10-year-old child can legally walk into the wild, capture a living god capable of reshaping continents, and carry it around in his pocket. Nobody in this world finds that strange. Today we are breaking down 5 plot holes in Pokémon that the franchise has never been able to explain away, even after almost 3 decades. Pokémon. One of the biggest media franchises on the planet. A world built around catching, training, and battling creatures with abilities ranging from shooting fire to controlling time itself. For something built primarily around catching cute monsters and winning badges, the world of Pokémon is actually layered with a surprising amount of internal logic. Type matchups, evolution mechanics, regional ecosystems. The writers clearly thought about how this world functions on a basic level. But the deeper you look at how this world is actually structured, the more its own rules start contradicting each other. Not just silly kids show logic. Actual breaks in the internal consistency the franchise itself established. 5 of those breaks are what we are covering today. Let's get into it. Plot hole. Number 1. Legendary Pokémon should have already reshaped civilization. Let's start with the biggest one. The one that should fundamentally change how this entire world functions. Legendary Pokémon are not just strong battlers. They are established repeatedly and explicitly as beings capable of altering reality itself. Dialga and Palkia control time and space. Groudon and Kyogre can reshape entire land masses and oceans. Arceus is stated outright to have created the universe. And throughout the anime and games, ordinary trainers, including actual children, regularly capture these beings and add them to a 6-slot team alongside a Pikachu and a Bidoof. Here is the problem. If catching a legendary Pokémon is genuinely achievable by an untrained 10-year-old with a handful of Pokeballs, the existence of these creatures should completely dominate every region's politics, economy, and military structure. Governments should be desperately trying to capture and weaponize Dialga to win any conflict instantly. Energy crises should not exist in a world where Groudon can theoretically reshape geography on command. Instead, legendary Pokémon captures are treated as isolated personal achievements, celebrated for an episode, and then essentially ignored by the rest of the world's power structures. Nobody from any government shows sustained interest in controlling reality-bending weapons that are, by the story's own internal logic, sitting in random children's pockets. The story needs these Pokémon to be catchable for narrative payoff, while also needing the world to otherwise function like nothing has changed. Both of those things cannot be true at once. Plot hole. Number 2. Pokémon Center's free healing breaks. The show's own economy. This one is smaller in scale, but once you notice it, it becomes impossible to unsee in almost every single episode. Pokémon Centers heal any injury, any status condition, any level of exhaustion, completely free of charge for any trainer who walks in. This is established as a universal, unconditional service across every single region in the franchise. But the world of Pokémon otherwise runs on a completely normal capitalist economy. Trainers pay for Pokeballs. They pay for potions and revives at marts. They pay entry fees for gyms and contests. Nurse Joy services are the single glaring exception to an otherwise consistent economic system, an unlimited, instant, completely free medical service available to literally anyone, regardless of need or ability to pay. If this service genuinely costs nothing and is available to everyone unconditionally, the logical consequence should be that nobody ever buys healing items at all, since walking into any Pokémon Center solves the exact same problem for free. Yet trainers are shown stockpiling potions and revives constantly, as though the free option barely exists. Either the centers are not actually free, which the show never indicates, or every single Pokémon Center in every region is operating at a permanent, unexplained, massive financial loss that somehow never collapses the system. The show wants Pokémon Centers to feel warm and welcoming without ever addressing how an entire interconnected economy survives, giving away its most valuable service for nothing. Plot hole. Number 3. Pikachu's refusal to evolve. Contradicts. How evolution is shown to work for everyone else. Here is one that sits right at the center of the franchise's most iconic character. Evolution throughout Pokémon is generally framed as a natural and often necessary step in a Pokémon's growth, frequently tied to combat readiness and survival in the wild. Multiple trainers in Pokémon across the franchise are shown choosing to evolve specifically because the increased power and survivability is too valuable to pass up, especially in dangerous or competitive situations. And yet Ash's Pikachu, across literally hundreds of episodes spanning decades of continuity, consistently refuses to evolve into Raichu, despite repeated opportunities and even direct exposure to evolutionary stones. This is framed purely as a personal choice rooted in identity and pride, which is a genuinely sweet character beat on its own. The problem is that the show simultaneously presents evolution as something many other Pokémon pursue specifically for power and survival advantages in high-stakes battles, while never explaining why an evolved form would somehow compromise Pikachu's identity in a way it apparently does not compromise any other Pokémon's sense of self in the franchise. If evolution is purely optional and identity neutral, every Pokémon's emotional relationship to evolving should be treated with the same weight and nuance Pikachu's gets. Instead, evolution is shown as an automatic, almost unquestioned upgrade for nearly every other character's Pokémon, making Pikachu's refusal less a thoughtful exception and more an inconsistency the show needs specifically to preserve its mascot's exact appearance indefinitely. Plot hole. Number 4. Team Rocket's Elite Agent. Status contradicts. Decades of failure. This one is less about world-building mechanics and more about a direct contradiction in how the story treats its own characters. Jesse, James, and Meowth are introduced and consistently referred to as agents of Team Rocket, an organized criminal syndicate with serious resources, advanced technology, and according to the show's own dialogue across multiple seasons, genuine standing within the organization's hierarchy. Giovanni personally assigns them, trusts them with specific operations, and treats them as legitimate, if occasionally disappointing, members of his organization. But across literally hundreds of episodes, this same trio fails to capture a single Pikachu using plans that range from mildly clever to actively self-destructive, get blasted off into the sky on a near-weekly basis, and demonstrate a success rate so low it should have resulted in termination, reassignment, or at minimum serious internal scrutiny from an organization. The show insists is dangerous and competent enough to be a genuine ongoing threat to the protagonists and to the world at large. Team Rocket's broader organization is shown elsewhere in the franchise, capable of sophisticated operations, advanced cloning technology, and genuinely threatening schemes involving legendary Pokémon. That same organization somehow continues funding and deploying a field team with one of the worst track records imaginable, for years, without consequence. Either Team Rocket as an organization is incompetent at every level, which contradicts the serious threat it poses elsewhere in the franchise, or this specific trio should have been removed from the field decades ago by any organization remotely as functional as the show needs it to be in other contexts. Plot hole number 5. The regional Pokédex border problem. And finally, the one that becomes obvious the moment you actually compare two regions side by side. Pokémon are repeatedly shown living freely in the wild, completely independent of any human-made borders, moving naturally through forests, oceans, and mountain ranges as part of established ecosystems. Common, widespread species like Pidgey or Rattata. Type equivalents are shown thriving across multiple distinct biomes within a single region. But when a new region is introduced, certain extremely common species from previous regions are frequently absent entirely from the new regional Pokédex, despite no in-universe explanation for why a creature that thrives in forests, grasslands, or coastlines in one region simply does not exist at all in a neighboring or even distant region with nearly identical terrain and climate. If Pokémon distribution were based on genuine ecological logic, similar habitats should logically support similar, if not identical, wildlife. Instead, regional Pokédexes function less like consistent biological ecosystems and more like separate, arbitrarily curated lists, where a Pokémon's existence in a region depends entirely on whether the writers decided to include it for that specific generation, rather than any environmental logic the show otherwise tries to establish. The franchise wants its world to feel like a living, interconnected ecosystem, while simultaneously partitioning that same world into regions that behave as though they exist on separate, disconnected planets whenever it is narratively convenient. So there it is. 5 plot holes in one of the biggest franchises in entertainment history, hiding behind nearly 3 decades of cute monster designs and catchy theme songs. None of this changes how much fun this franchise is, or how clever its core battle mechanics actually are. But these contradictions are real, and once you notice them, every Pokemon Center visit looks a little different.